This is Inside the Right. Tim, we are now witnessing an absolute avalanche of disinformation surrounding this hurricane, most of it perpetuated by Donald Trump, by Elon Musk, by other Republicans within the GOP. And they don't seem to be shamed by virtue of the fact that they're being told that what they're saying is abjectly false. Does what's happening right now worry you about what we're going to see in November?
Yeah, it worries me with both. And I think this is a very clear preview of what we're going to see in November, which is these just fabricated examples of fraud or cheating or whatever out of random places. And, unfortunately, like the forces that are trying to protect our democracy and our system are going to have to like play whack-a-mole
Right.
with all of these lies in order to bat them down. And you're seeing this right now. There's real life suffering as a result of this in the areas that are affected by Hurricane Helene. There have been local first responders who have said that they've gone like dispatched people to an area because there's some viral MAGA Facebook post about how the FEMA has abandoned
Right.
this community, this one area, and then they send people that there's nobody there. It was just totally fabricated. And then you saw with Elon Musk and Pete Buttigieg like that. The Secretary of Transportation has to handhold the richest man in the world because he's like making up lies about how you can't get relief helicopters in, when like the reality is that that there were almost in-air crashes because like people were sending in their drones and people were, like there has to be a system so that this can be done efficiently. And rather than trusting that the experts are handling this as efficiently as possible, or rather than going through like normal investigative channels, journalists to like kind of to determine what the truth is, the guy with the biggest following on social media is just popping off lies to the point that's creating such damage that like Pete, when he has real business to take care of, has to like call him and talk him
Right.
off the ledge. And those are just a couple examples, and we could go through quite a few more.
Right. I think one thing that's especially pernicious is a lot of Republicans are saying there's no money left in the disaster relief fund because all of that money went to migrants. And so think about the amount of people out there who might need aid, who might need relief right now, who are just thinking to themselves, well, I heard from Elon Musk, I heard from any of these right-wing provocateurs on Twitter that there's no money left, so don't even bother applying for it, when, again, that's just completely false. But now people who need money, who need aid, aren't going to do it because a few of these Republicans who are just looking to help themselves or help Donald Trump politically have basically made these people believe that there's nothing left.
Yeah, and it goes all the way up to like sitting senators, like the Trump, as a presidential candidate. And you had to see the Biden administration and FEMA, and even some like local Republicans who live in these
Yeah.
communities and are dealing with real life suffering, have to put out statements. It's like, no, this is not true. There was you can get money. Please, go through the normal systems, to make sure that you can get the assistance that you need if you're suffering from this hurricane. And there was one example of a Republican state legislator in North Carolina that said that he was hearing from constituents that FEMA was like eminent domaining the property and that people it'd be illegal for people to go into their like they couldn't even go back to their
Yeah.
homes or they might be arrested. And he has to put out these statements. It's like, no, like you can get your property. Like you can go get your $750. The $750 is not all you can get. That is just like the initial money that anybody can have access to, so to help people kind of bridge, over the next couple of weeks so they can have money to go get groceries or whatever, or like a hotel room for, I mean, even that's only like 2 nights, but still like that, they're being told all of these things that are false, and it is actually impacting people who are suffering. And the whole point of the government, like even if you're a libertarian, like the whole point of the government is to help in situations like this, right?
Right.
Like even if you're an anti-government, right wing, like these are the times that this is the reason we have a government, and they're just totally undermining the efficacy, and they're doing so like for the most cynical possible reasons to try to hurt Kamala Harris and the Biden administration.
How does this hit you as somebody who lives in New Orleans, who lives in Louisiana, and obviously a big part of Louisiana's recent history was the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, to see all of these Republicans exploit a tragedy for their own political benefit?
Yeah, it's horrible. And it's also horrible because these areas in North Carolina, like they weren't prepared like the people in Louisiana are, right? Like you even see suffering in Louisiana, like even though people are prepared, but like there's a system, people have food, like there's like tons of social media posts and like community support about, okay, what do you need to do to prepare, if we're seeing this hurricane like develop in the Gulf, like all of that, like people here are at least, minimally ready for what's coming. That wasn't true. Like you're not expecting this,
In
if
Asheville.
you yeah, right, in Asheville, you're just not. And so there were a lot of people that were really unprepared. And so they, in some ways, like they need it even more, right? Like
Yeah.
good communication, the facts, like what are you supposed to do in these situations? Like what can you have access to, right? Like all of that stuff it's tragic that it had to happen after Katrina, but because of Katrina, like a lot of people in Louisiana like are familiar with, right? Like they don't know. So it's even more important now, like in these areas, that like the government does its job to try to provide help, and to have these Republicans just like for nothing, I literally for nothing, for totally cynical political ends, trying to spread this false information, like and like absurdly false information. It is extremely disheartening, and the most disheartening thing about it is like there's no national Republicans calling it out,
Right.
right? Like at the local level, you see local mayors, local state reps, because they live there, right? Like
Right.
there's experiencing this. Like you don't, there's nobody. Like it's not as if, oh, Donald Trump's being bad, but Mike Johnson and Mitch McConnell,
No,
you
it's
know what I
just
mean?
it's just abject cowardice from the only
Yeah,
people who might be able to have some influence on this.
totally. Yeah, there's nothing. They're absent. And again, I think that this speaks to what has happened to the party in the Trump era. And there's a lot of people that are like, oh, well, if Trump just loses, all this stuff goes away. Like when you have a contaminant over a long period of time, it like seeps in and it
Yeah.
infects everybody. I mean, if you go back to 2017, it was different. Like Trump lied. Most of the Republicans were cowards, but still, there were like moments where they're like, no, that isn't true, what he
Right.
said. Or, there were like these little pockets of resistance within the party. There were, I was still in the party. Like there stood Paul Ryan, even, he was cowardly at a bunch of times, but he was speaker and he would say, no, this isn't true. Right. Like there were different moments. Like all of that is gone now. Like
Yeah.
no one steps up, and like lying in order to own the libs is like the core principle of the party now. And so there is no amount of tragedy or no amount of seriousness, as we saw during COVID as well, that will shake them from going along with it. It's really, really depressing.
Well, one of the biggest purveyors of disinformation, and you alluded to this before, is Elon Musk. Do you think that he is doing this in bad faith because he wants Donald Trump to get into office? He was obviously with him at his Butler rally, and this was a mere 18 months after the guy posted that for Twitter to work, you have to be politically neutral. You have to make both sides just as equally upset. Cut to 18 months later, the guy's on stage with Donald Trump at his rally in Pennsylvania. So, do you think Elon is doing this because he is just looking to shamelessly help Donald Trump in any way he can, or is he just so red pilled, just so lost in the sauce? Has he basically like high on his own supply, right? That he is just susceptible to the same disinformation that he himself is spreading so prolifically on Twitter.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, to be honest. Like on one hand, there's motivated reasoning. Like he has his personal issues with the left, and his desire for Donald Trump to win and to not be regulated, and all of this is giving him motivation to like come up with any excuse to tear down the left possible. But I also do think that his brain is broken. Like, and I think that, if you are just always being fed and like you're living in this disinformation soup constantly, where everything you're seeing on your little phone, which he's obviously on like 18 hours a day, it seems like, is just the craziest conspiracy stuff. Like you do start to buy some of it, like, and you do start to believe it, and you do start to believe your own lies and BS. And so again, good on Pete for calling him, because sometimes it takes that sort of thing to break the bubble. Because if you're just in your phone, you're like, these guys really do want MAGA people to die, and like
Yeah.
the government does want it. So I mean, I think that's it. And then I also think some of it is just shit posting. Like he likes it for laughs. And like that's the saddest part about all this, Brian. Like there's one example. Like my husband showed me a friend from high school on Facebook posted this AI picture of Trump, and it's like there's some going around. They're like obviously not true, but this
Yeah.
one's like I could see how you could get fooled by it. I mean, it's ridiculous for any of us, right? But like you could see how you get fooled by it. It's like Trump wading through water, and but it's like there are people like Elon and his little minions who tweet that stuff for fun. I think it's funny. But then real people out there are like get mad and they get
Yeah.
radicalized because they're
Yeah.
like, oh my God, Donald Trump is helping people. He's wading through the hurricane water and the media isn't covering this and Facebook is deleting it. Like this is why this is how you get to a situation like January 6th. Not to tie everything back to that, but like it really is that like that fine line between like the trying to be a funny troll or whatever
Right.
and like having real impact on people.
And then finally, I think I'm very worried about what this bodes for November because we're used to disinformation on the internet, right? Like there are a lot of, like most of the people in these right-wing provocateurs, the Charlie Kirks, the Jack Posobiec's, all of these people exist to just help Republicans in any way they can. They'll spread articles from Breitbart or Zero Hedge or just these completely inaccurate sources, and you kind of get used to the whack-a-mole that is living in the left of center media ecosystem, which is spending half, if not most of your time just rebutting bad faith right-wing talking points or right-wing disinformation. What I've seen in the last week surrounding this hurricane is has no precedent in anything that I've ever seen online. Just the sheer amount of disinformation, the deluge of lies. There is no way for the left to combat it. I can guarantee you that most people do believe, at least that traffic in the right-wing media ecosystem, that most people do believe that Democrats don't have any money left because they've used all the FEMA money, the disaster relief fund money, on some completely separate DHS program, which, by the way, both of these programs have their money allocated by Congress. So for one program to be able to use money from a different program would only require an act of Congress, and Republicans control the House. So that notwithstanding, how do we move forward into an environment in November where we know that they're going to lie about drop boxes, about vote dumps, about ballot harvesting, about fraud, knowing what they're capable of, knowing how few scruples these people have, and how breathlessly willing they are to share this stuff, and knowing the size of the accounts that are willing to engage in this stuff so shamelessly, including Elon Musk's with 200 million followers?
Yeah, so the bad news on this front is it is going to be worse than 2020 on the disinformation side because the machinery didn't even really get going until late on election night, right? Like the disinformation machinery,
Yeah.
because they didn't all know that they were going to have to do a stop the steal thing, right? Like
Right.
until like the numbers started turning, and then that's when you see like, oh, there's a truck going from Detroit to Ann Arbor, like all that sort of BS
Yeah.
started, but all that started late into the night. The disinformation about this election is starting right now already, October 6th, right? So there's an entire month additional that we didn't have to deal with last time, where there's going to be stupid stuff that they make up based on one random person goes into their voting booth and their name isn't on the thing or their name's on it twice and they think, you know what I mean? Like there are going to be a million stupid examples of this.
Yeah.
So I think that's a real problem and a real tough thing to challenge. The only good news I have on this front, it's nice to end on some good news, is there also is an ecosystem now of people to rebut it, which there wasn't in 2020, and like a big effort is being put by obviously pro-democracy groups, Democratic groups, but also even like some of these former Republican like elected officials, like Stephen Richer in Arizona and stuff. Like there's a group of people that are like working to rebut this stuff, so that's good. And the Republicans bombed in the midterms, so like this would be a real crisis if like Carrie Lake was the governor of Arizona right now.
Right.
So
Right.
thank God, like the Democrats really control like the key offices in the key states, with a few exceptions, and a few of those exceptions are the Republicans in Georgia who were like the only ones that acted responsibly last time. So like that is like the good news, but man, it's going to be an avalanche of this stuff from now through January.
Yeah, yeah. Well, all of that, by the way, underscores how important it is to continue to get these people in these important offices, because look again at how undiscerning and how few scruples Republicans have right now. So I think it's especially important, even in these Secretary of State offices,
Yep.
local election offices, to make sure that you put people in who actually have a bare minimum of appreciation, understanding, and allegiance to democracy.
Yep.
With that said, Very important for people who are watching right now to support the work that Tim and his team over at The Bulwark are doing, because they are giving a permission structure for these longtime Republicans, former Republicans, independents, to know that it is okay to vote for Democrats, to vote for Kamala Harris, and not just feel like you have some obligation because of some long-held party identity to cast a ballot for Donald Trump. So let's help elevate their content so that they can reach those people who we might not be able to reach as easily. I'll put the link right here on this screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Tim Miller.
This is Inside the Right.